Yo guys, it's Old Man G here, back again with another transfer update slash reaction slash what is going on at Manchester United. But before we get into it, first things, apologies, I'm not on camera today. I have a bit of a cold right now, and I've got a bit of work to do later, so I apologize. But I am joined once again by the amazing Tom, the journalist, and we're going to break down what exactly happened with Manchester United yesterday with all the announcements, everything like that. Before we get into it, guys, if you are new to the channel, to like, share, and subscribe to Red Devil Studio. Follow us on Twitter. We are United X and smash the notification button. Playlist Manchester United news, transfer news, etc. Tom, buddy, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing quite well, G. I hope yourselves is good, and everybody in the comment section as well. And yeah, like I said, we'll cover all bases on all different topics from the end of season review that's been conducted by Ineos and sort of the details of it. We'll pick apart the bones of it. With regards to ERIK TEN HAG staying, what happens next, like you put in your banner part, and we might cover a bit of bases around transfers and sort of the policy that they're going to look at going forward now that they have made a final decision.
Cool. Appreciate it, Tom. Thank you so much. Let me just quickly look at some comments here. So first of all, big up Eddie, man. Thank you so much. Guardiola says Ten Hag gets a chance to correct this Frankenstein team he has built. Let's see what he can do. I'm hitting that like too. Thank you so much, Eddie. Appreciate it. Let me just actually try for my camera on that. I'm at the wrong stadium. That was me watching the Champions League final at the stadium. So, but yeah. So let's actually get straight into it. Actually, so obviously, apologies for the first one. I wasn't actually live yesterday. I was busy working. I was on call. But obviously, the breaking news yesterday about Ten Hag basically staying at Manchester United. He's back. He's here, and I think the reaction, at least it seems to be from quite a lot of the fan base, was that there was shock. I don't want to say there was disappointment. I mean, because I've done quite a lot of polls on this channel, and I think there's quite a lot of people that were actually the majority of the fan base, majority of people, certainly in this fan base, and I suspect other fan bases as well, actually wanted ERIK TEN HAG to stay, which is fair enough. So, Tom, can you kind of give us a bit of information about what led to that process? Because obviously, from what you said, we know that they were interviewing other managers, Tuchel, etc., reject them, etc. So, what exactly was the process by which Ineos took to come to this decision?
The way that they conducted the review, as I said from the output, was that they had conducted it in 3 different sectors. For example, where they've had a massive blowout of injuries, how has that impacted ERIK TEN HAG's performance because he hasn't had a fully fit squad available? Has it made a massive impact in terms of the quality drop-off of players that he's lost, but also in terms of key positions? One of the talking points that ERIK TEN HAG put forward towards Ineos, it was to the back end of the season, towards when actually Jason Wilcox came through the door, and he was almost getting his feet under the table, and they had a brief private conversation regarding the issues at Manchester United, and ERIK TEN HAG was very clear with Jason Wilcox to say that I'm struggling to even pick any starting 11, let alone my preferred starting 11. And if I'm struggling with that, how am I supposed to compete with teams around me who do have starting 11s? They have their key players who are fully fit and can fire, whereas most of the players that I've had this season have been in and out of the team. There's been major fitness issues. He reiterated, ERIK TEN HAG, that there has been a clear error in the medical assessment of players for this season. He was in disbelief at the decision that Richard Arnold and John Murtough took when they removed Sergio Reguilón from the squad and they sent him back on loan. he actually campaigned, and Michel van der Gaag, his assistant coach, campaigned to say that we need Sergio Reguilon to stay for the rest of the season, because they wasn't happy that Luke Shaw, and they wasn't prepared to take a risk that Luke Shaw was going to stay fully fit for the rest of the season. They knew Malacia was a long-term injury; it was months. Luke Shaw, they didn't have an exact time frame on it, because the injury that he initially suffered, it was 4 weeks. Then it got back laid to 6. Then it was 10, and then suddenly it was coming up to 2 months, 2 or 3 months that he was out. So there wasn't a good timeline that they had, and the data and the assessments weren't. The data department from the medical department, they weren't giving across the right information to the coach, to them, the hierarchy, so then they can make the correct decisions. But they took the decisions that they didn't. Look, the review was based upon that, has injuries impacted ERIK ten Hag's season, which he's put forward as a massive claim to say it has. What's the morale actually like with the players? Do they enjoy playing for Manchester United as a club personally? And Jason Wilcox has conducted his own little internal discussions with players and stuff. He's had a lot of one-to-one talks individually with players. They've held talks with Bruno Fernandes, as it's been well reported, around his future and what the future plans are for Manchester United. The one thing that was come out now since the review has been put out is that Ineos were actually taken back by how much support ERIK ten Hag does have in the dressing room in comparison to what people might think. Now, the one thing that a lot of the dressing room sort of rumours come out with was the players like ERIK ten Hag's style that he wants to implement at Manchester United. The problem is they've not had any time in the season, or a gap in the season, to actually work on it in practice. They've had they've had the Champions League running that they had in. Then they went deep in the FA Cup, so then they've obviously still had fixtures there. You've had major players missing out with injuries. He even used the point that he's had to pick like 10 different backlines this season, back fours. Whereas last season he had a consistent back four, arguably maybe up until, I think it would have been about maybe April, sort of March, April, early April time, when Martinez and Varane started getting injured toward the back end of that season. And then he lost them. But ever since then, the review has panelled out and it's concluded that ERIK ten Hag is the best placed candidate out of him and the other managers that they'd listed and looked and spoken to. They believe that ERIK ten Hag is the best fit candidate to move forward with, and they are planning to build the future with him. There is, based upon the review, the one thing that Ineos and Sir Dave Brailsford in particular led the audit and the review of Manchester United was, if we do decide to keep with ERIK ten Hag, we will discuss a new contract extension to solidify him as Manchester United manager, but also put a bit of faith in him as a gratitude from us to him to say, we want to stick with you and work with you. The review audit, effectively, when they was looking at all the managers, like when they met, Sir Jim Ratcliffe personally met Thomas Tuchel and his agent. I've had that fully confirmed now. He did meet Thomas Tuchel personally in Monaco. He was coming back off his holiday with his family in Switzerland, and he went to Monaco. When they'd met with Thomas Tuchel, they clashed on a lot of different factors of the club, the recruitment in terms of the football club, and sort of impact that Thomas Tuchel would have had if he came in. He didn't agree with. He didn't agree with the transfer policy of targeting a lot of younger profile players. Yeah. And he also didn't like the fact of that when he came into Manchester United, he wasn't going to have as much influence in terms of if he wants to bring in, let's say, a data analysis guy from Bayern Munich, or he wants to bring in a set coach, a specialist coach for, say, a throwing coach. He's not going to have that level of control. It's based upon who Ineos believe is the best in class. And if they match up with the manager that they have in place, then they'll go and get that person.
I think that's a very, very key approach. I think a lot of people yesterday, from what I was reading on Twitter, seem to just sort of think that, the reason why ERIK ten Hag stays currently is just because of the fact that United won the FA Cup final. And well, I suspect, obviously, that may have contributed as part of the assessment.
Yeah.
You know, I struggle to believe that that was the only reason as to why ERIK ten Hag stays. And as you've rightly said, you said about Tuchel, the assumption that there were just tons of managers available willing to conform and that were better than Ten Hag, and they're willing to conform. And that were not only better than Ten Hag, but were willing to conform to what Ineos wanted from expect from the manager. It's almost similar to the Chelsea situation where Chelsea interviewed Nagelsmann, and they said no, it's not going to work simply because he wanted more control, he wanted more say, and it seems that a lot of these organizations now with new management, they want to give far less control to the manager over say, and that's a problem. So, but yeah, sorry, go on, buddy.
No. And with like I was just saying, with the assessment that they made with other candidates, like when they met Thomas Tuchel, the one thing that Ineos had always enlisted was they looked at the open market with managers, and they said, if ERIK ten Hag was on the open market, would he be a manager that we would probably put in the same bracket as Thomas Tuchel, as Roberto De Zerbi, Pochettino, Gareth Southgate? Would we put them on our list? And by the assessments that they've made, they made the assessment that they would have put him top of the list based upon that he was happy to evolve into a structure. He's been very open into the doors at Manchester United. And the one thing that the one thing that I know Sir Dave Brailsford in particular, who was the main leading guy to say that we should keep ERIK ten Hag as the head of the audit and the review, was his honesty. So Dave Brailsford rated ERIK ten Hag's honesty as soon as he walked through the door. And the one thing that Sir Dave in particular was impressed about with Ten Hag was that when he was so open about where the season had gone wrong, it wasn't a case of he looked at it as he was making up an excuse. He gave the logical data behind it to say why it's going so wrong. And ERIK ten Hag has pushed to Sir Dave Brailsford to say, we need some improvements in terms of medical facilities because players are getting injured far too easily. If you want to win league titles, you're going to have to perform hard in training. And if I want to perform hard in training, you're going to have a couple of players who might pick up a knock here and there. If you want to reach the top levels of football, you need to be able to compete at a high level, not only on the football pitch, but on the training pitch at Carrington. And if I can't do that to my players, based upon that I'm going to have a worry that I'm going to lose people throughout the season, how am I supposed to then implement what I believe is the best way to play football? And the way that Ineos structured it with the style of play that they want to implement at Manchester United, again, they looked at the candidates and they said, who's going to fit that profile? ERIK ten Hag has always evolved in saying that he wants to play a certain way at Manchester United, but he will take on ideas from those above if he believes that there's a better way or a better solution to get results and go forward. And the one thing that has culminated in Ineos deciding that Ten Hag was the more valuable target than the other managers that I've just listed, that they conducted in reviews with, and they even met with some of them, was he was open to working with them and not push back against them to the point where it's a complete in denial. Neither side's going to almost give the hand up. The one thing that Ineos will do is they will give Ten Hag a say, like I was saying before, in terms of recruitment policy. The recruitment team will be led up eventually by Dan Ashworth when he comes in, but it will be led up by Jason Wilcox for now, who has a good relationship, from what I've heard, with ERIK ten Hag ever since that he's come in. And the one thing that Jason Wilcox has done in particular is he's almost merged it in to the hierarchy with Ineos, Jean-Claude Blanc being the interim CEO at the time, right now, where when we make assessments on players, I want to consult the manager on this basis, based upon I'm not an expert in this role, but also I want the coach to have an influence on what players we decide upon. But we won't let him. But I don't want him to have the final say. I just want to hear his voice in the board meeting. That's effectively what Jason Wilcox has campaigned for. But he doesn't want to have a case of where it's a full control operation for Ten Hag. And Ten Hag's happy for that. He wants to work with a structure above him. he certainly feels privately with what he expressed to his agency is, he feels he works better when everything is done for him, and he just makes a judgment on what's good enough on the training pitch or not. That's the way that he looks at it. And effectively, if they do follow up with what they're saying that they're going to do in EOS, which is give him a new contract, they will give him a new contract based upon that he has to meet certain restrictions, which is he has to play a certain style and try and evolve the team. He has to work with a different strategy in terms of player profiles, which might be a younger set of players than he's used to working with. And then going forward, what is the end of season aims? Is it to get into the Champions League, which it probably will be? And then there will be this almost roadmap that they're going to plan out where it will be, well, ever since Ineos have come in, the roadmap for the first season, when we get a full season under our belt, which will be at the start of next season, is get back in the Champions League, compete potentially towards the top end of the points tally in the Premier League, not challenge for the title, but go to the top end of the points, and effectively play a style of football that entertains the supporters groups. And that's effectively what Ineos want in the short term. And from the review that they've led, they believe that ERIK ten Hag is the best man to take them forward with that. He's happy to work with them. And again, it's all about communication in this case. And they felt that they had better communication with ERIK ten Hag, albeit with all the scrutiny and the speculation that's been behind the scenes regarding his future, and he's been almost indecisive regarding it. But the one thing that Ineos have made very clear is the review and the audit isn't based off of one game in the FA Cup final.
Of course,
it's based upon what they believe is best for the future of the football club. And they don't believe that there is anybody out there in the world market of managers that's better placed to work under their structure that they've put in place than ERIK ten Hag. And effectively, from the names that they had at the disposal, I think you could argue that that's probably the right assessment.
Yeah.
Because there isn't a top 4 or 5 manager in the world available right now, unfortunately, or who would come to this country like a Zidane or a Carlo Ancelotti, a Klopp, a Pep, or, those managers aren't available, unfortunately, right now. So you're going to have to take a risk and go somewhere else with somebody like a Tuchel, or stick with what you know is at home. And effectively with Ten Hag at the start of next season, that's where the real assessment will take place with Ineos in terms of, well, we're giving the guy a chance now. He's got a fully fit squad. There's no excuses now.
Thank you for that, Tom. I appreciate it. There's a few questions coming into the chat, which we'll address, but that's really, really useful, Tom. Thank you so much. So I think David T, big up David T, who says, hey, Tom, there was a report that Ten Hag are logheads because he still wants full control over transfers because it's in his current contract. Is this true?
Well, in terms of his current contract, that's based upon, he signed that contract upon the old regime that was in place, which was Richard Arnold, John Murtough, and the Glazer family. All 3 of those are no longer in control of the football operations at Manchester United. Richard Arnold has resigned. John Murtough has resigned by mutual consent. The Glazer family don't have sporting and operational control over the football club. It's a completely different feeling for what Ineos are coming in to do. It's different to what he had worked with before. The thing with Ten Hag was, the old regime when he came into it, he didn't trust the people above him to get the players or get the right profile of players that he wanted. So he wanted the control so that he could make what he believed was the best assessment of players he wanted. And it was almost like he was praying that the people above him would then deliver the players that he asks for. Like he asked for Frankie de Jong, they didn't deliver him. He asked for Benjamin Pavard, he didn't deliver him. These players that he's asked for, time and time again, the old regime that he had that control with over failed him. He believed that he targeted the right players, but the players that he targeted, they just didn't get him. That's the problem. And as much as you can say for what it is with the players that he brought in, like Anthony and stuff, where you can say he completely misfired the whole thing. He didn't tell them to pay 100 million euros for Anthony. That's the difference. He's a football guy, not a finance guy. That's where he differentiates himself. He believes that the players that he ideally wants are good, but he doesn't value the players. That's where Richard Arnold's job was, because he's a financial guy. That's where John Murtough's job is. He's a football guy. He should be able to value a football player accurately. And he massively miscalculated that with Anthony. And like I say, going forward in terms of if they when they offer him a new contract, those restrictions will be in place over what element of control he has. He's prepared to accept a lenient role in the club, work with the people above him, because he believes that the new people that are coming in place above him, he trusts them. Like I said, he's got a good relationship with Jason Wilcox ever since he's walked through the door. He privately expressed to him about the concerns over the squad and how the fitness issues with the players. He completely was honest with Sir Dave Brailsford over the assessment of the whole season, saying that it was a shambles. It's not good enough. It does need to improve, but I can't improve when I don't have options. That's my issue, and that's what he made very clear. And they liked that about him. As much as the characteristics say, they liked that about him. Thomas Tuchel, the problem with someone like Thomas Tuchel is, if he was in this situation that Ten Hag's in right now, if he didn't like what the people above him were saying, he'd blow the gaff up. He'd come out in the press conference and he'd blitz them. He wouldn't necessarily name drop them, but that's the character
Tom,
between managers.
you're absolutely right, and I think this is one. This is why when I ran to someone on Twitter with people who just list managers and just assume that like ownership would just pick anyone, and one of my reasons why I always had an issue that if Tuchel was going to come to Manchester United is because there's a reason why he was sacked by PSG, by Chelsea, and Bayern Munich, despite doing quite well. And all those clubs' perspective, it's because he falls out with hierarchies. He fought out with upper management at PSG because he didn't feel like they didn't give him enough control. He fell out with Chelsea, because behind the scenes, it sounds like even though they wanted their new guy, I think behind the scenes it sounded like he didn't necessarily agree with the way they were going, the direction they were going in with, buying young players under 25, etc.
Yeah.
He wasn't keen with that. And now Bayern Munich, he's only there for one season. Okay, yes, he went trophyless this season, but the reality is that again, it's because he's fallen out with the board, etc. So the idea that Manchester United that despite falling out with top club hierarchy management, that he was going to now somehow fit with Manchester United, in my opinion, was foolhardy. That just wasn't going to happen. And as you said, the other candidates, so I think you're right, and I think it's good to have a nuanced take on this whole thing, because I think a lot from what I've seen, there seems to be a like, oh, if you're Ten Hag in, they always wanted him, and if you were Ten Hag out, he got on technicality or all the rest of it. Like, I think that what you can't accuse Ineos of is, at the very least, of actually engaging a proper review process, which is what they did, as well as assessing the current options. So it might be that obviously it goes badly this season, and at the end of next season, there are other viable options, which obviously they'll have to pay. But we'll talk a little bit later about the whole new contract and what that's going to mean. So, but yeah, there was just one other question in the thing that I think Carpi, where is it? Yeah, every comment. Tom, do you think targets like to deep? Oh, okay, we'll come to transfers a bit later. So and then I think there's yes, we'll come to transfers. Any of your transfer talk will come after we just talk about Ten Hag. Big up Grace in chat as well. So I think big up Jarvis as well, buddy. Really appreciate you coming in. So I think the second part of this, I guess, of this is with Ten Hag now staying, and they come to the conclusion. What does this mean for like his what is going to be the expectation for him this coming season? What is he expected to do? What is the new dynamic between him and Ineos going to look like?
Well, the new dynamic in the short term is that he's going to have a working day-to-day relationship with Jason Wilcox, which is effectively what he wanted with John Murtough. But the problem with John Murtough was he didn't have massive experience in that role, in a football operation role. He was almost he was a deputy in a headmaster's role. that was the problem with John Murtough. He understood how to work under people, like what he did at Everton, and he's worked his way through the ranks at Manchester United. But when it come to him leading a group and a team, he wasn't a leader. That's the problem. Richard Arnold, the commercial department at Manchester United made the point for the last 12 months that Richard Arnold, he didn't inspire people. He didn't evolve the football club or try and take control of the club to then steer it towards success. The problem and that's maybe the indifference that Ed Woodward had. He did have that leadership quality about him because he made a success of United commercially for years. So the commercial department were fully behind Ed Woodward. But the problem was he wasn't a football expert. He wasn't a guru. So when he's not a football expert, how can he consult with managers of the caliber of Mourinho and say that I'm right when it comes to player recruitment and you're wrong when Mourinho's done what he's done in the game of football? He's clearly got a good talent eye for players. And like I said, with the league going forward in the short term, the summer transfer plans will be led based upon when they recruit players, they want players who are fully committed to the cause of what the project is, which is we want to win the Premier League and the Champions League in the future. We're building a young, hungry, modern squad, which is going to play what they say is going to be fast, attacking-paced football. That's what they want to bring at Manchester United. And Ten Hag is almost pivoted in that case and stated, well, I'm prepared to play that way so long as you buy me players that fit that way. That's what he wants. And he didn't trust John Murtough was going to get him the players to play that way. So he effectively took control of something that he wasn't fully confident in, but he felt that he had more knowledge and experience than the people above him. That's the issue. And at that time with Manchester United, they were desperate for a coach. So if a coach wants to come in and have control, they were prepared to give him it. And the fact of that John Murtough allowed Ten Hag to come in and demand that such level of control over a football club just shows how incompetent at his job that he was. He's supposed to be the guy that leads the recruitment. He's supposed to be the guy that leads the finding and recruitment of players. But he allowed the coach to come in and do that for him effectively. So what was he doing? He did nothing. That's the problem. And with working with someone like Jason Wilcox, where he has a good relationship with him that he's built over the last couple of weeks, he likes the guy. He thinks he's a credible guy based upon the work that he did with a lot of young players at Manchester City. He believes he's got a good talent eye for players. Southampton only recently just got relegated. He went and be the director of football at Southampton for, I don't even think he was there for 8 months, bearing in mind. He was in place for the summer and January windows when they recruited players in, and he's got them and parachuted them back up to the Premier League in the first try of doing so. So he's done a successful job wherever he's been, in whatever role he's done. Obviously, you can't take director of football at Southampton in the Championship and then do that role in the short term at Manchester United. It's a different calibre of job. But the thing is, he's got credibility. He's got credit in the bank. And the fact of that Ten Hag has a good relationship with him, a lot better than what he had with Richard Arnold and John Murtough, he trusts the guy. Like I said before, he's got a good relationship with Dave Brosford, based upon that Dave Brosford has made an assessment that he believes the medical department has been a massive contributor to the failures of the season. Not only that the coaching's not been up to scratch with Ten Hag, and he accepts that, but he made the point. How can I make a massive coaching, success when I can't even pick at any point in the season my preferred starting 11? I've lost players in every single match day weekend that are essential to my team. That's the problem that he says. I don't have options. So effectively, where am I going to go in the future? And that's again where, when the recruitment comes in place in terms of the players that we go for in the summer, Ineos have a profile that they want to follow up on. It will be Jason Wilcox, Dave Brosford, and Jean-Claude Blanc's assessment of those players from a financial perspective of Jean-Claude Blanc, a performance perspective of Sir Dave Brosford, if they're fit for purpose to play and represent a club like Manchester United, and then from a football perspective of Jason Wilcox, along with the assessment of ERIK ten Hag, if he likes the player or not. That is where effectively the window is going to circulate around those 4 key players in the football club. That's just until Dan Ashworth comes in, and then it will smooth over a lot easier because Jason Wilcox will effectively be Erik ten Hag's right man for the whole duration that he's at the football club. He'll be by his side effectively as his technical director, but he will just be the glue to all the football club. So he will go to Erik ten Hag himself as a good young player called, whatever in the youth ranks. He's 17 years old. Bring him up to the first team. I want you to work with him. See what he's got in the men's team. There's a brilliant young player over here in Italy. I want you to come on a private flight with me, with our chief head scout, and I want you to come and have a look at the player. That's effectively what his role will be, inevitably. But in the short term, that's how it's going to work. And Ten Hag is happy to work with that, based upon, again, he has a good relationship with Jason Wilcox. He's got a good relationship with Sir Dave Brailsford, and Sir Jim Ratcliffe has trusted the people that he's put in place who are leading the football decisions. Effectively, he's doing what the Glazer family didn't do, which was allow them to run the football club. Let the football people make the football decisions. And Sir Dave made the assessment that Erik ten Hag was the best candidate to go forward. Jason Wilcox made the same recommendation. And Jean-Claude Blanc said, well, from a financial perspective, the market out there, what the figures that Thomas Tuchel was quoting was more than what the contract Ten Hag is on. De Zerbi was going to be quoted similar sort of figures. Thomas Frank was minuscule down the ladder, but he wasn't as much a credible candidate. So these managers were demanding a lot or didn't have the same quality abilities that Ten Hag did, which made him the best candidate for the role. And then just going forward, that's how the relationship will work. But they will smooth that over, and they'll smooth all of this painting work over where it's almost a bit like, well, they went behind Ten Hag's back and spoke to all these different managers before they even told him what's going on with his own future. They'll smooth that over by just putting a bit of faith in him and saying, well, we'll add another 0 on top of your contract for, let's say, 3 years, sign on for another 3 years, Erik ten Hag. And that's effectively what they'll do. They'll give him a cash injection, of course they will do, but they'll also give him a booster in terms of saying, well, you've got a minimum of 3 years to work under our structure with us. And that's the way that Ineos worked with it when they was going to either employ a new manager or stick with Ten Hag was, you either work with us or you don't work with us at all. It's as simple as that. Cool. And Ten Hag was the only one that they believed could work effectively with them out of the options that they had at the table.
No, I think that's fair, and I completely agree with you, Tom. I'll ask you just as well because we'll just quickly talk. So I think how much have I got? Probably got. Cause I've got to head off by 10 to midnight, so we'll get to some of these questions, and then we'll quickly talk about the Ten Hag's contract and what the future looks like, and then just some transfer news. So RSV says, question, Tom, were the Gareth Southgate links or PR, or are they keeping Erik ten Hag for the shorter term so they could hire Southgate? Also, will Ineos fix the wage structure?
In terms of the Gareth Southgate links, I've said this before, the links more or less came down to and because of the relationship that he has with Dan Ashworth. And of course, Dan Ashworth isn't in place at this moment in time. So the assessment that they've made was based upon the candidates that there was out there. And when they assessed Gareth Southgate, a part of the process to say if he was out of a job, the way that they did it was effectively all managers are out of a job, because if we want to decide upon one of them, we're going to have to pull them out of somewhere. If they're in a job or if they're not, we're going to have to negotiate with them or get them out of there if we think they're the best man for the job. And effectively, when they made that assessment with Gareth Southgate, they didn't believe he was a credible candidate because they didn't think that they would have got him out of England before the Euros. The only thing that Ineos liked about Gareth Southgate was they understood the toxicity that England had as a national team before Gareth Southgate went in there. It was a topsy-turvy ride. You had Sam Allardyce, you had Roy Hodgson. You can even go as far back as managers like Capello. Like, it wasn't a happy camp. There wasn't that unity with the squad. the one thing that Gareth Southgate went in there and did was, it wasn't so much about being a brilliant tactical manager or experience or quality. It was almost as if that he could just relate to the players because he'd been one of them. That's what they put faith into the guy for, and he allowed people like Steve Holland to come onto his team with England to say, "Well, you've got experience. You've worked with big managers. You've worked in big organisations. You've worked with Chelsea. He's worked under managers like Carlo Ancelotti. He's had a figure in those sort of managers. It was Jose Mourinho's assistant at Chelsea. Jose Mourinho at Chelsea was one of the most successful managers in Premier League history. With everything that he won, including with the Premier Leagues. The fact that he didn't win the Champions League, but when you medal up the success that the people around Southgate have had, and what he's done effectively from where he's took England to where they are, from where they were, it has been a success. But the problem is, he's not delivered with what he's had at his disposal, and that's where they think that he's fallen short. And effectively, to answer the second part of your question, RSV, are they keeping Erik Ten Hag for the shorter term so they could hire Southgate? If they wanted to get Gareth Southgate out, they would have, when Erik Ten Hag went on holiday, they would have effectively told him, don't come back. There's no reason for you to come back. We don't wish to stick with the future with you. We're going to terminate your contract. You get a €8 million payout or whatever the fee would be. It's sort of an undisclosed figure of what it would have been anyway, but it doesn't make a difference now. And then effectively, they would have waited for Gareth Southgate to finish the Euro campaign, but the timelines for if England got to the latter stages of the Euros, that's when Manchester United pre-season would effectively have begun. So Gareth Southgate would potentially still be at an international tournament. He's not just going to ditch England if he gets so far to come to Manchester United. And that's the problem where Ineos looked at it and think, we need a manager in place. We need stability for the players, for the club, and to go forward with the recruitment for the summer. We need stability. And Gareth Southgate effectively wouldn't have been a credible candidate based upon they didn't think he fit the role well, but also the timelines didn't add up for him to come into Manchester United anyway. So two of the things that went against Southgate was they didn't believe that he would have fitted into the structure based upon that he's never worked in a big football club before. And when the going gets tough in tournaments or wherever he's had a bit of adversity with England, he's buckled, which at Manchester United, you're going to face a lot of it. If you're going to ever win league titles or anything, you're going to have a lot of those moments where it's going to be about, if you make a substitution, it will impact, a whole season for 7-8 months of work. That one substitution could change everything. That's the difference making between winning the league title or not. And at the end of the day, with the final point, also will Ineos fix the wage structure? That's one of the key points that Jean-Claude Blanc is currently working on, is in the interim point. He is in consultation with Omar Barada. It is an expectation that he would have been anyway, regardless of the gardening leave process. He's got a hand over to him at some point. So there is that consultation period there. The thing is, he can consult with Barada to say what Manchester United are currently operating at, so how much money they are making, the revenue projections, etc. But Barada can't lead and he can't influence what Jean-Claude Blanc does. That's the difference with the gardening leave agreements. So with Jean-Claude Blanc, the wage bill structuring, the way that they're going to try and fix it is they want to sign young players on their first professional major contract. So when they sign players in at Manchester United, they're not coming in for £200,000-300,000 a week. They're coming in at like 100, 125, 150,000, and then they sign on for 4 years. And then when they get to the third year of the contract, if they're good enough, they'll keep the player, they'll reward the player and say, well, we're going to give you a bit of faith in you. We're going to up you to 175. But at the end of the season, if you score 10 goals or you have 10 clean sheets if you're a defender, you then get a £25,000 increase to your wages for the following season. And that's how they will effectively do it. It will be bonus and performance related. By doing so, you'll cut down the wage bill costs because you don't have to pay players as much, but also Then when you effectively get rid of a lot of the higher wage players on the bill, for example, if Casemiro leaves the football club and Varane's already going, Varane and Casemiro leaving, effectively, you lose already £500,000 per week off of the wage bill. You lose £250,000 that you don't pay to two players every single week for a full year. That's effectively a new player. And that's exactly where Ineos are looking at and saying, well, we can save money, but we can also buy quality players in the market who will be prepared to come in for players. And that's why when we made the discussion that I did last stream about Michael Elise, he's not a kid that's motivated by money. That's the sort of player that Ineos like because of those reasons and because he is a top player. And that's where characteristic assessments come in with players to say, well, in terms of what I said with Dave Brosford leading it in terms of performance of players, is that player going to be a key fit for the club and the culture of the football club? If they fit into place, Sir Dave will put a tick next to it. If he doesn't think that they're going to do, based upon assessments, he'll put a cross through them and say, no, they don't fit what Manchester United need. They're not a character, they're not a leader, they don't, bring traits, qualities. They don't bring anything different to what's already here. If you're not going to bring anything different, you're not going to come to Manchester United because they've signed the same signings, the same profile of players, and it never works. So they've got to do something different to try and change it. And the reason what Ineos are trying to do behind the scenes in the short term is change the morale, change the culture of the football club, which they then believe will entice players to come on board to the project, but also will get a lot of these players on side to say, well, maybe this is a different approach. Maybe this is something different I can buy into. And you might see some of these players who people might write off and say maybe need to leave Manchester United. They might suddenly turn around. But it's not about turning round for one season. You have to turn it round for the rest of your playing career. That's the difference. And there's some players, if I had to name somebody like Marcus Rashford, who, if he does get another opportunity next year under this structure, he has to change the motivations for what he had the previous season. Because the season just gone now, it was terrible from him. The morale, the character, the personality, it was lost in translation completely. He looked like he'd lost his way as a player, but also as a person. And you can't help but feel sorry for the guy. Something's gone wrong off of the pitch to make him be that way. But then suddenly, you can't go from being one of Europe's elite forwards the previous season and scoring the digits that he had done to then a shadow of that player the following season. It doesn't happen. And that's where there's a problem. And Ineos believe it's based upon the culture and the old regime, but that's where they believe the changes that they're making with players will impact that going forward. And when, like I say, you get such as Jason Wilcox in a better place role, in his technical director role, working with players like Marcus Rashford, it comes natural to people like Jason Wilcox. He's done it with young players before at Manchester City. He's moulded players like Phil Foden to be able to be in a team ahead of players like Kevin De Bruyne, and when he was there, Ilkay Gundogan and Bernardo Silva, brilliant players. He got him into that team somehow. So getting a player's career on track, if it's possible to do, and the player wants it just as much as Jason Wilcox would try and help them to do, he could do that for Marcus Rashford. But the problem is the players have to do it themselves just as much as somebody else is going to try and influence them to improve. That's the problem. And there's some players who are cut out for that, and there's some players that aren't. Marcus Rashford, you can't make an assessment because he's had one season where he looks like he's on top of the world. He's going to be, he's almost peaked. This is his peak of his career now. And you're going to see it for 5-6 years. And then suddenly it's just gone. It can't happen. It doesn't happen in football often now.
That's fair, Tom. Thanks again for that, buddy. We've got probably about 20 minutes. So I think we'll keep it to, I think the last two questions I think will be just quickly on like what is or potentially is Ten Hag's new contract going to look like for the next, say, 5-10 minutes. And then we'll just end things with, as I think a lot of people are talking about transfer news. Like how much do we, like basically how much we have to spend on transfers, what's latest transfer news? I think, for example, there's talks about Greenwood going to Juventus, for example, and a few other things like that. So, firstly, just 5 minutes on like what ERIK ten Hag's contract is going to look like, and then second, latest transfer news, especially regarding Greenwood and other sales. Is that okay, Chief?
Yeah, that's fine.
Cool. Nice of it.
Well,
Go on. Yeah.
you want me to start with Greenwood or?
No, the contract. Yeah, what is ERIK ten Hag's new contract going to look like effectively?
Oh, his new contract. Well, the way that the contract for Ten Hag is going to be structured is that they're going to make it where he has more than 2 years in excess on a new contract. The terms of the contract are going to be set up in baseline with the structure that they put in place, so he won't have as much control as he did under his last contract. He's prepared to accept that. That's where the agreement is between the two of them to continue on in as manager and as ownership, and they're prepared to work with each other, which is a good thing. And that shows that there is that bond and unity between the two parties, the manager and the structure. And effectively, then that's where they will look at him and make the assessment of, well, we are going to give you a chance, ERIK ten Hag. You've got, say, 2 years to work under our structure with the agreements that we have in place. And if you get to those end of those 2 years, you have a +1 agreement. But the +1 agreement is triggered by us and us only. You have no control over that. That's how ineos will conduct it. So if it comes down to it and they give him, say, 2 years, or they're prepared to give him 3 years, by the time you get to, if you get to that point of those agreements, then we will again make the assessment of if we believe that you've been a success, fine, we'll auto-renew the contract already. The same terms, the same contract, everything, for another 12 months. And in in that 12 months, we'll then negotiate with you again if you want to stay on again as well. So effectively, that's where the agreement is, that they're prepared to give ERIK ten Hag the faith and the belief in him to say, well, we believe in you. We're going to give you a set amount of time to work under our structure and with us. And if you are a success, you will be rewarded for it. Of course, you should be. But there will be contractual agreements to say what the aims are of the seasons, what the process is, and effectively, they will have had to have sold him this anyway for him to want to stay on. So, for example, if they, like I said, rolled out the time after saying, well, in the first full season that they're in place, they won't even be back in the Champions League. If he complies with that and he gets that far, fine, he can stay on another season. Right, the next season, we want to focus on containing top 4, but we want to challenge for the league title. We want to be up there. Maybe not win it, but we want to be in and around it, 3rd place minimum. Then the 3rd year is where we need to go bang and we need to take off and we need to catch up to Manchester City. We need to be in the conversation with Liverpool, Arsenal, and almost make it where the top 4 is guaranteed for us. The top 4 is guaranteed, but it's guaranteed on the basis that we compete with Manchester City all season and we push them to the end of the season. And if it means we win it, we win it. If it means we didn't and we competed, we competed. That's then where we'll make the improvements to go again next season to make sure that we do win the Premier League or we do win the Champions League. But that's the roadmap that they want to build out. And they will have built that out already with Ten Hag, and they'll build that out and they'll almost solidify that roadmap with him when they offer him the new contract and he signs it. And that will effectively be, well, you're on board, ERIK ten Hag. Now steer the ship. You coach the squad, you coach the players. We recruit the players to play a certain way. You are prepared to coach that way, which you believe in and you're happy to do. Right, we're all on board. We're all in the same ethos. We all want the same thing. We all want to make Manchester United a success. We can do that off the field because we've got the best football experts in place, as they believe. And we've got the best people to make the assessments of players, financially, performance-based, and also football-wise. And then effectively, you just need to coach the players. So then when you coach the players and you get to that level, then you'll be rewarded with with a bonus in your contract or a triggerment, which a triggerment in football terms is, for example, when you achieve one of the big major honours in football, which is arguably the Premier League or the Champions League. When you win a domestic league for whatever league you're in, or you win the domestic Champions League, when you reach one of those components, effectively you get a massive payout, almost on par with a payout of what you would do if you got sacked. So, for example, if ERIK ten Hag won the Champions League under his old contract that he had with the Glazer family, he was entitled to a £4 million payout. But if he then won the Premier League, he was entitled to a £2 million payout. That's effectively how it works. So when you reach a certain agreement as part of the contract for what you've achieved, you automatically trigger the jackpot of whatever that is. And that's where managers work towards in terms of, well, if we be a success, I stand to gain X. And of course, Manchester United will stand to gain Y, because prize money in football is so high at the moment, and TV rights are always going to go up in price anyway. So everybody's going to make money. Effectively, that's the higher level of football, and really where football will go with Ten Hag and the future for Ineos going forward.
Thanks for that, Tom. I really, really appreciate that. Really appreciate you. And said for those obviously who are watching, make sure you remember to like, subscribe to Red Devil Studio. Follow us on Twitter. Also, make sure you follow Tom on his Twitter handle as well. One of the most reliable footballing journalists out there. As you rightfully said, the journalist who said Ten Hag said was going to have to get this. Oh well, I mean, unfortunately, This is why I think you should never ever ever like go on scenes, etc. You should never be. I think people are very quick these days, especially in the social media era, to be first, to get clicks, to get attention, etc. And I always just think that it's never worth it, just for the sake of media attention, because at the end of the day, it affects your reputation. And the Guardian reporter and a few others that basically said he's going to get sacked. I'm looking at quite sketchy right now based on what's happened. Don't say something until you have absolute confirmation, in my opinion, that is going to happen. Big up minds who watch us on Twitch, bro. Jonathan David may come to Manchester United. Don't leave yet. I'm not sure. I have to see how he plays, because he's Canadian, isn't he? So I have to see how he plays in the Copa America of the USA to make an opinion. So lastly, because I have to leave the next 10 minutes. Last 10 minutes, Tom. Latest Manchester United transfer news. Can you give us an update regarding transfers, specifically for example, with Greenwood, maybe Todibo, anything, at least say players that United are linked with?
Yeah. Well, if we start with Greenwood, the running theory with Manchester United is they do want to sell him. He's prepared to move on. He's burned. The thing with Mason Greenwood is he had a lot of obviously backlash based upon the situation that happened between himself and the partner, and it blew up into the media, and Manchester United's name were dragged into it based upon it. Was almost like a condolencing thing, that they knew about certain problems that he'd had in his personal life, and nobody in the hierarchy failed to interject and actually take control of the kid at the time. And the assessment again that it was at the time when Richard Arnold was in place as the CEO, they made the assessment on Mason Greenwood to say that, well, we're going to have to do something with him. And when the charges were dropped and everything, and people listen, you can make your own mind up about what your opinion is, his person on the personal situation that happened. But everybody can have their own opinion. We live in a world with free speech, and at the end of the day, it happened. And the way that Rich and Aldo make the assessment was, we can't just pay somebody to sit on the sidelines who's that good of a player that we're effectively either going to decrease his valuation as a player because he's not going to play, or we're going to lose money anyway because we're going to have to pay out his contract. and he still had 2 years to run on his original deal. So he was earning a lot of money for doing nothing effectively and just sitting on the sidelines. So the way that Manchester United structured it was, well, in the short term, we can have the best of both worlds. If we find a football club that we can loan him out to, he can increase his stock because we know he's a top player and he's going to develop and potentially either maintain his stock price in the market of football or he's going to increase it. And on top of that, we don't have to fork out millions of pounds every year to pay out on his contract. So effectively, we will have a second partner who's going to help us pay him off for the year. So we're not going to be losing out on loads of money. And Getafe, the one thing that Manchester United and Getafe have done this season in particular is they've almost built a bit of a partnership as a football club where they like how each other work as a club. They operated the negotiations for Mason Greenwood very well. He had a lot of interest over European clubs. Manchester United specifically chose Getafe based upon they felt that the way that the Spanish football is facilitated fitted the way that Greenwood would like to play. They felt that the culture of Spain would suit Mason Greenwood based upon what they'd done for him. And Getafe had almost laid it on thick with Mason Greenwood, say, well, we've got, accommodation. We've got an accommodation facility that you can move straight into as soon as you join us. We will give you a grand arrival at the stadium. You'll have 20,000, spectators that will come, applaud you, sign autographs, everything. It's almost like a fresh start. They gave him his career back, is effectively what Getafe did. And Mason Greenwood liked that side of it. But the one thing that I know of Greenwood anyway, the burn, in particular Richard Arnold, he burned a lot of bridges with Mason Greenwood and his family. The one thing that I know in particular anyway, that it got to the point where as soon as an agreement was in place, it was a month after he'd moved to Getafe, communication between his camp and Richard Arnold over the future and what they will eventually try and do or work something out, it completely broke down. There's no communication. It was almost as if they'd blocked each other's numbers. There wasn't any dialogue. There's no communication. There's no planning. There's nothing. They burnt the bridges, and that was that. And Mason Greenwood, at the end of the day, from his perspective right now, he just wants to move on from Manchester United. He wants to move on. The Getafe have offered Manchester United the exact same terms for this season. A loan. We'll pay off his contract. 60-40 in our favour. We'll pay 60, you pay 40. Mason Greenwood stays on for another year. He's happy to stay on another year with Getafe. He's enjoyed his time there for the time that he had there. But he eventually wants to have a big move in football. And one of the clubs that are massively in for him is Juventus in Italy. There is others that are out there that are looking at him. Barcelona, I know, was another club that had looked at him as well. But the financial constraints of the club aren't in good stead. And Xavi was the manager who liked and the coach that liked Mason Greenwood more so. Hansi Flick, I don't know if that he'll have the same assessment of it, but that's just the way that they've assessed him as a player. But Juventus, I know, are one of the clubs that are massively in for him. But whether they eventually sell him or not, Manchester United have options. They can either buy out another year and try and maintain and increase his stock again, and then sell him the following summer. So they effectively buy themselves more time, or they then can gain a windfall from selling him now, and they've almost just moved on from the problem. And I think from the interests of what both Ineos, the new regime coming in, and from what Mason Greenwood's camp want is they want a resolution, they want a mutual parting of the ways, and they want to go off in the different directions. And based upon, I think, how maybe he's felt that he's been treated from Manchester United and they didn't show him any leniency or support after the allegations were dropped, I think he feels dismayed upon because he gave a lot of his years and he gave a lot of his youth to Manchester United, and they just almost pushed him over and didn't give him a chance or didn't give him that second chance. And people can make their own opinion if they think he deserves it or not. But in exactly the same case that Manchester United feel that, well, he fucked up. You fucked up, Mason. You made your own choices. Nobody made the choices for you. The assessments were what they are. We have to make our own risk assessments to protect brand interests and the football club. And that's where Fergie's old motto of no player is ever bigger than the football club came into play. And effectively, it's damage limitations. Remove the leak from the sinking ship before it capsized. And that's effectively what they did. So they saved a lot of money, and then going forward, they stand to gain a lot. But again, like we play, say, like Sancho as well, the resolution for Sancho, irrespective of if Ten Hag stayed as the manager or not, the character profile that Sir Dave Brailsford has done on Jadon Sancho, he doesn't believe his character fits to play for Manchester United. But it's whether or not they can get a football club to buy him and take him on a permanent deal. They don't want to loan him. Dortmund have offered again the same term loan for what they've offered him this year and Manchester United this year, but they want to permanently get rid of him. They want a fresh start. And the one thing that you can say with Ineos is they have a lot of plans in place, but they've just got to try and put them through and get them through. That's the problem. And again, with players like Elise and stuff, now you know what's happening with the manager situation. You can approach these players because you can properly sell a project and say, well, ERIK TEN Hag's the manager. He's getting 3 years, he's getting a new contract, whatever. We're working towards a young, modelled squad. This is where your role would be integral in the team. Are you on board or are you not? And same thing with players like Todibo as well, which the one thing that I didn't know anyway was if Ten Hag was to stay in Manchester United's control, if Ineos, in hindsight, didn't come into the football club and Ten Hag still had the control that he wanted, Todibo was his priority player that he wanted this summer. Irrespective of fees, anything, he wanted Todibo at all costs because he believed that putting Todibo next to Lisandro Martinez when he's fully fit and he recovers from his restrained injuries that he's had over the last season and two, that is a perfect partnership for 4 or 5 years. And it's almost a match made in heaven. And Ineos' assessment of Todibo, well, I think you can tell that it's a very high assessment. He's still lasted as long as he has done at Nice. I would argue that he's probably their most valuable player and the most valuable asset that they have at the club right now. And again, it's the partner club of Manchester United at this point in time. So a deal is not going to be hard to do. The people that run Nice run Manchester United. So it's not effectively that they can sign him for €1 or £1. They've still got to do it financially beneficial for both clubs. But it'll just mean that they end up getting a player that they really want, and that clearly Todibo would value a step up going to Manchester United than Nice. And for his career, and well, even if you want to look at his motivation, again, Todibo is not a player motivated by money. I think he earns €80,000 at Nice, which €80,000, I could be wrong. I don't think it's £70,000 per week in British pounds, in British sterling.
So to interrupt you, Tom, I've realised like I'm gonna have to head up in 5 minutes. Can you just quickly because obviously you're saying along, so we'll probably have to come back to this more transfer towards the end if you're free. Could you just give just a quick, literally just 2-minute summary on Sancho, the Sancho status and like if United linked to any other player? Is that okay?
Yeah. Well, with players like Elise and Todibo, they're the ones that they want to target effectively.
Fine.
They're the priority players that they want. Jadon Sancho, Dortmund have offered him at Manchester United another loan agreement, the same terms of what they've offered from January to the summer, but they want him for a full season instead of the same terms. Manchester United would prefer to sell him. They're trying to market the player. Same thing with Greenwood. They're trying to market the player. They have options to loan them out again, but they want to get rid of the players permanently and add to the transfer kit for this summer that they can reinvest in the squad. That's effectively what they want.
Fine. Tom, I really appreciate you for the update as well, and I appreciate you for informing the audience as well. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Sorry, guys. I've got a work shift to go to, so that's basically why why I have to head off. So, but anyway, thank you so much for everyone in the chat. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to Red Devil Studio. Obviously, the Euros are starting this week, so I suspect transfer news will be down. I'll probably be doing live watch-alongs for the Euros, which will hopefully be good and can probably take my mind off United a bit as well. But yeah, if there's any obviously United news or breaking news, we will be live and we will discuss it if as long as I'm able to. Tom, thanks again for coming on. Make sure you guys follow his Twitter handle at Tom Journalist One. He's one of the more reliable journalists out there compared to so much clickbait that you see on Twitter, unfortunately. But yeah, thanks everyone in the chat, guys, and thanks everyone who will be watching it on live as well. Have a nice day, everyone, and cheers, peace.
Peace.